She walked into the FBI headquarters like a shadow slipping into the light, plain coat, worn shoes, nothing to suggest power. Laughter rippled through the lobby as agents mocked her, smirks flashing, phones raised to capture her humiliation. To them, she was a nobody. But in her silence, there was something unsettling. Because hidden inside that quiet folder she carried was a truth so explosive it would silence the entire room and flip the power dynamic in a single heartbeat. The marble floors of the FBI headquarters lobby gleamed under the fluorescent lights, a place where power was meant to be unquestioned and authority untouchable. Agents in dark suits moved briskly across the hall, their eyes fixed on clipboards, briefcases, and digital screens, too consumed by their own importance to notice much else. Until she walked in. At first, the woman drew only passing glances. Her shoes were scuffed, her coat plain, her hair tied back without ceremony. She looked more like a visitor lost on her way to the records desk than someone with any business in the towering fortress of federal authority. A ripple of condescension moved across the lobby. A guard at the desk leaned toward his colleague, smirking. "Wrong place, sweetheart. Starbucks is 2 blocks down." A quiet laugh followed, sharp enough to sting, though she never flinched. The undercurrent of arrogance was unmistakable. A junior agent whispered loud enough to be heard, "Some people will do anything to look important, while others smirk behind their ID badges." To them, she was out of place, an intruder in a world that thrived on hierarchy and credentials. Yet she didn't answer back. She didn't rush to defend herself. She simply moved with a quiet grace, her footsteps measured, her gaze fixed forward. There was no anger in her face, no trace of desperation, only a stillness that unsettled anyone who dared look too closely. The security scanner beeped as she placed a small leather folder onto the conveyor belt. Inside, a badge rested in silence, sealed in years of secrecy. For a breathless moment, the machine hesitated, as though even the technology understood what it had just touched. The laughter died down. Guards leaned closer to the monitor. One of them frowned, then double-checked the name flashing across the screen. Another agent stiffened, color draining from his face. The air in the lobby shifted. What had been mockery only seconds ago was now confusion, suspicion, unease. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. The woman lifted her folder calmly, closed it, and tucked it under her arm. Without a word, she looked around the room. Suddenly, those who mocked her felt the weight of their arrogance. They hadn't just underestimated stranger. They had underestimated someone who carried a secret powerful enough to silence an entire room of agents. She had learned long ago that silence could be sharper than words. Silence had carried her through years of being overlooked, dismissed, and written off as insignificant. To the agents now circling her with condescending stares, she was nothing more than a woman who didn't belong. What they could never see, what none of them could even imagine, was the life she had survived to walk through those doors. Her name had once meant something, though not here, not in this city of glass towers and federal seals. She had grown up far from power, on cracked sidewalks where the hum of broken streetlights was the closest thing to security. She worked shifts no one wanted, took jobs that drained her body, and still sent every spare dollar to care for her younger brother when he fell ill. The sacrifices became invisible scars, tucked behind a quiet smile, behind the unshakable calm she wore like armor. Yet the world had not been kind. She knew the sting of being underestimated. In courtrooms, she had been mistaken for a secretary. In airports, she had been pulled aside, questioned, treated as if her presence alone was suspicious. Even in simple places, a restaurant, a bank, a school meeting, she carried the weight of being doubted before she ever spoke a word. Humiliation was not new. She had swallowed it 1,000 times before, until it no longer burned, only hardened her resolve. But what they didn't know, what none of them here at FBI headquarters could guess, was that behind those sacrifices lay something extraordinary. She had once lived in shadows, working quietly for people whose names could never be spoken aloud. She had delivered files across borders where silence was survival. She had memorized codes that could unravel entire operations. She had seen men twice as powerful as these agents tremble at the mere whisper of the truth she carried. Still, she never boasted. She let their arrogance play out, let them smirk and whisper, let them build a wall of superiority brick by brick. Because she understood one simple rule: the higher their mockery climbed, the harder the fall when the truth finally struck. And that truth was coming. The hush that had fallen moments before didn't last. Arrogance has a way of clawing back at stage. One of the younger agents, his badge gleaming as though it granted him authority beyond his years, stepped closer and smirked. "Ma'am," he said loudly, making sure the entire lobby heard, "you can't just waltz in here with an old prop and expect us to roll out the red carpet. That badge of yours looks like it belongs in a thrift store display." A ripple of laughter spread across the room. The sound was sharp, cutting, feeding off itself as others joined in. Phones were lifted subtle at first, then bolder, screens flashing as bystanders began recording what they assumed would be another clip of someone embarrassing themselves in a place they didn't belong. Another agent chimed in from the back. "Maybe she thinks she's auditioning for a spy movie," he called out, earning chuckles from the crowd. The mockery wasn't private anymore, it was a spectacle. Security guards leaned against the desk, amused, trading jokes at her expense. The whispers carried across the lobby like wildfire. Who is she? Why is she here? Does she even know where she is? Yet through it all, the woman stood perfectly still. No flush of anger colored her face. No tremor of shame betrayed her hands. Her calmness was unnerving, though the agents mistook it for weakness. The more she refused to react, the bolder they became. One guard finally stepped forward, his voice dripping with false kindness that barely concealed mockery. "Tell you what," he said, holding out his hand. "Why don't you let us keep that badge for you? We'll frame it as a souvenir. Might even hang it in the break room for a laugh." The crowd chuckled again, louder this time, convinced she was cornered. Someone muttered, "She should just leave before it gets worse." Another whispered, "Poor thing, she looks so lost." Cameras clicked, catching her stillness, her silence, the faint tilt of her head, as though she were studying them instead of being studied. Every insult, every laugh, every cruel whisper only deepened the suspense. To the onlookers, she was just a quiet woman refusing to defend herself. But to anyone paying closer attention, her silence wasn't surrender. It was patience. And patience in the right hands is more dangerous than fury. The laughter still echoed when the woman finally moved. Slowly, deliberately, she opened the leather folder she had carried under her arm and placed the badge on the counter once more. The guard reached for it with a smirk, ready to make good on his cruel joke, until the scanner lit up again, brighter this time, the screen flashing with red alerts. A sudden silence fell over the room. The monitor, usually dull with routine verifications, now displayed lines of restricted clearance codes, each one stacking higher than the last. The guard's smirk faltered. His hand froze midair. Whispers cut through the lobby. "Clearance level 7? Impossible. No one has that." Another agent pushed forward, typing frantically into the terminal, trying to override the system. The screen refused to comply. Instead, a bold header appeared in flashing letters, "Authorized, black level access." Gasps erupted. Phones that had been raised to record mockery were now trembling, recording history instead. The smirking junior agent's face drained of color as he stammered, That's not even in our database." The woman finally spoke, her voice calm, steady, carrying a weight that silenced every whisper. "It wouldn't be," she said softly. "You don't have clearance to know it exists." The crowd froze. Even the senior agents, men and women who had spent decades believing they owned the room, took a step back. This wasn't a mistake, wasn't a prank. The badge in her hand was real, and its authority dwarfed every rank standing before her. She closed the folder again with a quiet snap and looked directly at the guard who had mocked her first. His bravado collapsed under the steady calm of her gaze. Around them, the agents shifted uneasily, as if the very air had changed. The lobby that had moments ago buzzed with arrogance was now suffocating in silence. Chairs creaked. A pen rolled off a desk and clattered on the floor, startling everyone with its noise. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. With a single revelation, the balance of power had flipped. Those who mocked her now stood paralyzed, realizing they hadn't been humiliating a stranger. They had been humiliating someone with the kind of authority that could end their careers, or worse, with a single phone call. And now, she had their undivided attention. The silence stretched so long it felt like the building itself was holding its breath. Those who had laughed the loudest now struggled to meet her eyes. The junior agent who had called her out in front of everyone fumbled with his badge, as though hiding it could erase his humiliation. The guard who had joked about framing her credentials stood rigid, his face flushed crimson, sweat beating at his temples. Their arrogance had evaporated, leaving behind only the sting of exposure. Around them, the crowd shifted. A ripple of whispers surged through the lobby, some voices hushed with disbelief, others tinged with awe. She outranks them all. I've never even heard of that clearance. What does it mean? The phones that had recorded laughter now captured trembling hands and wide-eyed stares, the story already spreading faster than anyone could contain. The woman, however, remained still. She did not gloat. She did not smile. She let the weight of truth settle where it belonged, on the shoulders of those who had mocked her. Her calmness was more powerful than any declaration of authority. She placed the folder back beneath her arm, straightened her coat, and simply stood, unshaken. The senior-most agent in the room cleared his throat, his voice cracking, as he tried to recover control. "Ma'am, forgive our oversight. If you'd allow us to—" His words faltered when she lifted her gaze. There was no hostility in her eyes, no anger, only the cool detachment of someone who had long endured injustice and no longer needed to explain herself. Justice did not roar. It did not need to. It unfolded quietly, invisibly, in the way shame hung heavy in the air. Those who had been cruel now found themselves exposed, their laughter echoing back as a reminder of how quickly pride turns into folly. In the corner, a lone clap broke the silence. Then another, and another. Soon, scattered applause rippled through the lobby, not mocking this time, but reverent, hesitant at first, then stronger, until the hall that had once ridiculed her now echoed with respect. She neither bowed nor waved. She simply let the moment speak for itself. Power, real power, was never loud. It was silent, undeniable, and absolute. The transformation was almost physical, as if the entire building had shifted around her presence. Where there had been smirks and sideways glances, now there was caution, deference, even admiration. The same agents who had mocked her minutes earlier straightened their ties and lowered their eyes, suddenly aware of their own smallness. Their pride had been stripped bare in public, leaving them exposed before the very person they had ridiculed. The whispers died into silence, replaced by the weight of respect that filled the air. Even the marble lobby, once echoing with laughter, now seemed to carry a solemn reverence. Nobody dared speak out of turn. Nobody dared step in her path. She had become the center of gravity, pulling the entire room into her orbit without lifting a finger. The junior agent who had led the mockery tried to retreat quietly, but the looks from his colleagues burned hotter than any reprimand. He had humiliated himself beyond repair, and his silence was now his only shield. The guard who had joked about framing her badge stood stiff as a statue, his earlier confidence shattered into nothing but regret. Their fall was as sharp as her rise, though she never once gloated over it. Instead, she remained composed, her calmness itself a form of authority. She didn't need to raise her voice or issue commands. Her mere presence had reordered the room. Respect once denied her, now settled on her shoulders like a mantle, earned not by demand, but by revelation. A group of onlookers, visitors who had witnessed everything, exchanged glances of awe. One of them whispered, "She carried herself like this the whole time, even when they laughed at her." Another nodded, "That's strength. Not power you can take away." As she turned toward the elevators, agents instinctively stepped aside, creating a clear path. No one blocked her. No one questioned her. The applause that had rippled through the lobby earlier lingered in memory, replaced now with a heavy, unspoken truth. She was not ordinary, and she never had been. The woman who entered as a target of mockery left as a figure of quiet, undeniable respect. There are moments in life when the world is forced to stop and look again, moments that peel away arrogance and reveal the truth that was always there. That day in the FBI headquarters was one of them. What began with laughter ended in silence, and in that silence, respect was born. The woman who had been mocked for her plain shoes, her modest coat, her quiet demeanor, revealed that appearances are nothing but fragile illusions. Respect is not stitched into fabric or etched into badges visible to all, is carried in the scars of sacrifice, in the weight of choices made in silence, in the dignity of enduring humiliation without breaking. She had lived those truths, and when the time came, they spoke louder than any insult hurled against her. The agents who had sneered and scoffed learned their lesson, not through lectures, but through the collapse of their own pride. Their arrogance turned to ash the moment her identity unfolded before them. And those who watched, those who whispered and recorded, left with a story that would echo far beyond the walls of that building, a story of humility outlasting mockery, of true authority requiring no announcement. Power, real power, does not need to be loud. It does not swagger or shout. It does not demand to be seen. It waits silently until the right moment, and then with a single gesture, it changes everything. Her walk through the lobby became more than a confrontation. It became a parable. Never underestimate anyone, for you do not know the battles they fought in silence. Respect is never about appearances. It is about resilience, sacrifice, and the quiet strength that survives when everything else has been stripped away. True honor is not given, is earned, often in the shadows, often in pain, and always with dignity. As the doors closed behind her, she left more than stunned agents in her wake. She left a lesson carved into memory, a reminder for all who saw it and all who would hear it later. The underdog is never powerless. The underestimated are never empty. And the quiet ones, they carry the loudest truths of all.